Great. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to hear about this clearly very popular topic that we have Christina Patton and Mary. I'm going to screw up your last name, so I'm just going to let you say it. But Mary from Bio here to talk to us about understanding Gen Z. So I am just going to turn it over to both of them.
Yeah, all right. So, the title of our presentation is No Cap, Understanding Gen Z from the Inside Out, which just means like no lie. We'll talk about it very honestly with you all and kind of give you a good understanding. Um, Going through some of our session goals, so we really kind of want to explore generational influences, like how the pandemic has in fact or impacted students, how digital culture, social media, stuff like that, like maybe even like a shorter attention span, definitely does impact Gen Z's academic and career decisions. We're gonna talk about some communication strategies that you may be able to apply to just build trust with students, be able to support them with planning and being more autonomous and accountable kind of for their own actions and their own academics. And then really helping them like understand their why and their academics and their career. Like, why are we choosing this specific degree? Why do we want to go on this career path? And then just recognizing some common Gen Z advising scenarios, stuff that I'm sure we've all had a lot of experience kind of dealing with. And then just looking at different approaches that might foster motivation, resilience, and then just goal alignment with each other. Um, but yeah, okay. I know my camera can cut, or not my camera, my microphone can cut out if I go just like the teensiest bit away from my computer. So please tell me if you can't hear me at any point. All right, I'll let Mary introduce yourself first.
Hey, hi everyone. My last name is pronounced Kuligowski, so it sounds a lot different than how it's spelled. But anyway, I'm an advisor, like Amanda mentioned, in our bio and neuroscience department. So over in class, I was born in 2001 and I was in my second semester of my freshman year in college in 2020 when everything shut down. So my undergrad was up at Northern Michigan University in the UP. So I was very secluded when all of that happened. So that was my experience when COVID happened. I graduated with my bachelor's in 2023. I'm also now a current grad student and full-time employee, so I'm working on the work-life balance that is a big thing talked about in Gen Z. So I'm currently going with that. And then I also got to teach FYS 1010 last semester. So I got to work with some of our like new freshman students too. So that's kind of my background as a Gen Z. And I'll pass it to Christina to introduce herself. I think your mic's,
Oh, is it not working again?
yeah, you're,
Yeah, I hate my microphone. Does that work?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'll take it.
You're,
I just have to get really close to the camera. So, my name is Christina Patton. I'm a pre-health advisor in the Pre-Med and Health Sciences Center. I mainly work with pre-nursing students, so it's a very fun population. But I was born in 2002. I'm turning 24 this year. It's very scary for me. I graduated high school right in 2020, so it was my last semester of my senior year when everything was shut down and we were moved to fully remote. I did not get to go to prom. I had a drive-through graduation, which was so interesting. They handed me my diploma through the window. And then I went to U of M and I graduated in 2024. So my first year of freshman year was fully remote. And then my sophomore year was a mixture of remote and in person, but we all were still wearing masks. Like Mary, I'm currently a grad student as well in the anthropology program here as a master's student. I'm also a full-time academic staff. So just, yeah, like Mary said, really trying to figure out how to balance work, life, school, just trying to keep it all in one area. But yeah, that's a little bit about us. All right. Cool. Okay, so we have a question to pose if you would like to unmute or put it into the chat, but just think about a recent Gen Z student that you have advised. Thinking about their communication could be through email, could be in an in-person conversation or over Teams, but what stood out to you about their communication style or their expectations of the advising appointment?
yeah, the Gen Z stare is very, yep. I've been accused of doing it by my dad. My family.
Yeah, more informally.
Informal. Want the responses immediately like a text. Yep.
Yeah. Mm, yeah. I get that a lot, Megan. Oh my God, Sarah, that's so funny.
Deanna, that's so true. I've noticed that with Gen Z students, we do speak very fast. I do know I'm someone who does that, so if I am speaking too fast, please tell me to slow down. So, but yeah.
Ooh, yeah, turning on the camera more. I will say I do have a lot of students who come in and they're like, hold on, give me a second. I need to adjust my camera. So I appreciate that. Yeah, Michaela, you're so right.
Mhm. Oh, Kim, I like what you said. We'll ghost for a long time and then barrage with emails and texts when they do need something. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. It's urgent. They need it. The response now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. Really good responses. All very, very true. So,
Yes.
going into our agenda of like what we're gonna kind of overview is who is Gen Z, Gen Z in the higher ed context, the RUC helping model, practical strategies for advising Gen Z students, and then if we have time, we can move into some case studies and scenario-based brainstorming, and if anyone has any questions at that end too. So,
All right. So a bit of the breakdown with Gen Z, kind of like what, oh, I don't know why that looks so weird. But who is Gen Z? What kind of defines them? What is the age range that we're looking at? So there are younger Gen Z and older Gen Z. The students, especially like the first year and sophomore students that we are seeing right now are younger Gen Z. So between the ages or born between 2005 and 2010. Me and Mary are both older Gen Z. So we were born between 1997 and 2004. So there's a little bit of a different like characterization with both. Younger Gen Z want more of that instant access. They want something that's very personalized. They want that personalized experience. They want you to kind of tell them exactly what they need. I'll say with older Gen Z, I feel like we're a lot more financially conscious and a lot more socially active. So that is a very, very big component in it. And then just breaking down some traits and values. So big thing that we all kind of look at is mental health awareness. That is massive. Just making sure that like we have self-care, that that is something that is being advocated for. There's a lot of career fluidity and academic uncertainty. So those two kind of go hand in hand. We'll talk a little bit more about some like historical events that kind of shaped the Gen Z experience a little bit more. But with that, we want to make sure like we have a job that gives us like stable financial security. And with the career, we want it to kind of reflect that. And then there's a lot of digital immersion, like we said before, a lot of social media, a lot of TikTok, a lot of Instagram, Twitter, and then some values. We really appreciate real life experiences, that peer experience of being able to have that like one-on-one peer conversation, career-minded, authenticity as well. So I think a big component that I've seen with students, especially this past year, is just being as authentic as possible definitely helps you relate with them and build that trust a lot more. And then growing up digital, so with learning, we use a lot of interactive tools. I don't think that we kind of, I will say, especially for me, we had computers growing up, but it wasn't something that was active until probably like more towards middle and high school. I think with our students, it's something that they really, really grew up with, like starting within elementary school. With communication, it's very quick. They want easy access. They want it to just be like, answer my question right now. This is something that I need. A lot of that texting within email. They do not devalue one-on-one communication, though. I will say that is kind of a big misconception. That one-on-one connection is still extremely, extremely valuable. And then I will say Gen Z definitely does multitask a lot. So they look at several things at once. They have several tabs open. I'm like the worst person doing this because I will have TikTok playing, I will have Spotify on, and I'll have a YouTube video going, and then I'll have like a Google Doc open, and then I'll be on something else. So that does impact your intention, your focus, kind of how much effort you're putting into something. So these are just a couple of things that we wanted to define Gen Z.
So jumping into some statistics about Gen Z, also like kind of showing some like misconceptions sometimes within it. Uh, so 80% of Gen Z students do say that college education is very important or fairly important, which can be very shocking because I think there is sometimes, especially with the younger Gen Z generation, there seems to be like a lack of wanting to go into the college education, or that route because they want that instant money, and like influencer digital type of vibe of a career path, and they don't always see the value of a college education, but it is kind of at the moment with the students who are going into college education and being surveyed for this, 80% of them do find it very important. And then 62% of high school graduates do end up heading into college. So I remember finding that kind of interesting, especially with some of the graduation rates coming across like over across the country. 62% of those students who are graduating are heading to college next. And then 69% of Gen Z students are worried about the cost of college. Like Christina mentioned, we'll do a little bit of like background for Gen Z students, which there is obviously with the high cost of higher ed and everything associated with that in the economy. That does make sense of why it's such a worry, and there is a big push like with financial aid scholarships and everything too. And then 50% of Gen Z students view college for specific career preparation. So they're going for a specific career path and trying to find the way to that rather than picking the specific major and letting that lead them to a career. They're sometimes a little backwards in thinking, not in a bad way, but it's a little different with the system of how you go about it.
All right, a little bit more into some of that background. So these are a few, not all, of the major events that did shape the Gen Z experience. The 2008 recession is probably one of the biggest ones. I will say I do remember this very vividly. I think I was like 6 years old. But having that like economic instability, that job insecurity, the housing market and everything, it impacted our parents. It also just like genuinely impacted like how we view things. Growing up in a post 9/11 era, that meant there's heightened security, and we have a pretty diverse student population here at Wayne. So we have students who are like they directly are impacted by this. And they are continuing to be impacted by this currently. So a lot of that national trauma, but just that heightened security and the war on like anti-terrorism, all of that comes with a lot of connotations. We have a lot of natural disasters that have happened in the past 20 years. Katrina was one of the biggest ones, but that displacement, that the policy reform that happened out of it, just the overall impacts and structural issues, it impacted a very, very wide range of people, not just within New Orleans, but people were displaced into several different states, some of which came to Michigan. And then the COVID-19 pandemic is the most recent that, like the biggest event, but that really impacted learning. It impacted students' ability to socialize, to have those social skills. So a lot of our freshmen and sophomore students are coming in and they were in elementary school when COVID hit, and they came in with like fully online middle school or fully online classes. So they have a very different idea of kind of what is expected in an academic lens, but also just with like social preparation. And we definitely can see it in the way that they are talking. I see that Dean Strauss put in that students are using ChatGPT to write their student complaints. So really not putting in some of that effort. And also expectations are so different. They expect things to be very like one-on-one, but very, very individualized in a way that sometimes is not possible within our roles. So yeah, more into the current freshman experience. Our current students who are first years, they are around like 2008 is when they came in. So they were like seventh, eighth grade during the pandemic. Others were in high school during that. So they kind of had a shift to remote learning during a very formative social experience, like social time where you learn a lot of stuff. Social media also heavily impacts this. So day in my life, romanticizing kind of that college experience. They have a very, very set idea of what it should look like. And if it doesn't look like that, they feel a bit disillusioned. So that kind of shapes their identity and their connection, especially with community and peers. And because we have more of a commuter school here, that could be a little bit difficult for students. And then some of more of those like generational shifts. So mental health, financial stress, those are some of the biggest concerns I hear from students, especially 18-year-olds. They are just like very, very worried about being able to afford college, to continue going through it. That economic uncertainty and the cost of living that we're currently like facing, like that is going to just compound on top of this. So students want to graduate quickly. And like I said, I advise pre-nursing students so they have a very specific idea of what they want for their career outlook. And nursing is a very competitive program. So there's a lot of that disillusionment with like, when am I going to graduate? When am I going to get my degree? And like, how am I going to get a nursing degree if it's so competitive? So that urgency to graduate, like I completely understand it and I empathize with it because of those economic pressures. But again, we need to like kind of manage those expectations. They are pretty flexible, but you do have to lay the groundwork. They value inclusivity, they want that stability, and they want more of those interpersonal experiences than anything else. Yeah.
Again, feel free to unmute or use the chat. But what assumptions do you think people make about Gen Z, and how do those assumptions show up in advising?
I think we make a lot of assumptions about their comfort level with technology, actually. Um,
Mhm.
and from my experience, even in the FYS class, like I'd be like, "Well, do this," and they're like, "Where do I do that?" And I'm like, "I thought you were the technology people."
Yeah, I remember that in my FYS class too, where it was like, "Oh, you could just come find it here," and they're like, What do you mean?" It's like, "Okay, cool. Let's take it back. It's all good."
Right. So I think that's where we get very assumption based with our
Yeah.
students. Like they know all the technology and they sometimes are even more tentative about it than we are.
Yeah. Because I don't know now either. And this is just me like speaking out loud with it too. But I remember when I was in like middle school, I had like the tech classes because Heather mentioned like they don't know how to save a PDF. And I remember being in my tech classes, like my technology computer course, where you're sitting in the computer lab and that's what they taught, like how to use an Excel file or something like that. And I don't know if they even do that anymore. I know they've changed a lot of the curriculum, so it's like I don't I don't know. That's something I always kind of wonder about too.
Yeah. We got some in the chat. So Dana said they often do not advocate for themselves. They want it done for them by someone they trust. And I definitely agree with that. I see that a lot. Okay. Keep putting them in as you are thinking of them. Cool. So we're going to break down some myths and do some myth busting with Gen Z students. So I do see Michaela put that I feel like we often assume that Gen Z students are lazy. So one myth that we have is that Gen Z is lazy and entitled. Another is Gen Z only wants to communicate via text. Gen Z is addicted to social media. Gen Z doesn't care about college, and Gen Z has no attention span. All the things may be true for maybe some students, but breaking them down a little bit more. So the reality is, especially with Gen Z being lazy and entitled, they're pretty pragmatic and they're pretty career focused. They usually often juggle school with work, with personal responsibilities, with trying to maintain a social life, trying to figure out kind of what they want to do. So I feel like for us as advisors, what we can do is just help them prioritize and plan realistically. A lot of the times these students come in without like the ability to advocate for themselves and kind of know how to hold themselves accountable. So really just validating their responsibilities. Like, I know when I was in college, I worked like 2 to 3 jobs at times and I was going to classes full time. And I don't even know how I did that. I do not have a recollection of it, but just letting them know like that is super valid. Like that you have those responsibilities is not necessarily something that they may be able to even kind of prioritize or move around. And it's just okay if you're going to be working 40 hours a week, then we need to cut down on the amount of the credits you're going to be doing and maybe look at doing summer classes, stuff like that. Gen Z only wants to communicate via text. A little bit true, but they also do value that one-on-one, very authentic communication. They want to feel like they're having a conversation with you that they are a part of. So they like it when it feels personalized. They like it when you're able to relate with them. I use email so much. I think I use it a little bit too much, but that could be a good way to just email for logistics. And then just really trying to prioritize that like face to face or even online meaningful conversations. So I know with students, they will send me paragraphs in email form about advising questions. And what I will let them know is give them a very quick answer and then tell them this is something that we can continue within a one-on-one appointment. So just really saying like, I do want to have a conversation with you. I want to have a moment where we can talk about it a little bit more so I can understand kind of where you're coming from. And then going on to like Gen Z is addicted to social media. Social media is a great tool for connection. It is a tool that we've kind of just been really used to using all throughout childhood. So it's a great way to build community, to learn, to show your self-expression. It's also a great way to connect. So really using platforms like Instagram or even TikTok to share advising tips or share events that you're going to have coming. That could generate a very wider audience. Gen Z doesn't care about college. So, like we said, 80% say that college is very important. But that return on investment, the concern about cost, the concern about like, okay, putting in all this effort for a degree, am I able to get a stable job after this, is very valid. So really focusing on that career alignment, just making sure that they're thinking about like, okay, college is one part of it, classes is one part. Your degree is not just credits. It's also your experiences, your internships, your volunteering that you do, your student clubs, the community that you build, networking. So really looking at that, looking at transparent pathways as well. And then Gen Z has no attention span. I will say sometimes it feels like I don't have one, but that's also just being very highly efficient. We're very much used to fast-paced information. We're used to getting like a 25-second TikTok video that goes through a lot of different stuff. So really utilizing visuals and bullet points and making it as simple as possible, but explaining things, and using those interactive tools to keep advising engaging. I feel like that is the best way to kind of connect with some students, but yeah, and I know that there were a couple of comments put into the chat, so we can
So I was saying
definitely look at
Heather
those.
made a good comment of I feel like it ties in with the doesn't care about college but is focused on that career alignment. They do seem like not tied to one career field and whatever like they're open to change and knowing that like things might come up later on in life and
Mhm.
they have to pivot. So that's definitely one big thing.
Oh, absolutely. And then what Megan said and Helen said, yes, students, they really do like to come in for face-to-face meetings. With pre-nursing, we do peer support groups, and they absolutely love that. They love being able to come in and just like see advisors and then see like peer support leaders. They really, really value it a lot more than kind of just having like a quick phone call or sometimes even more online meetings. Sometimes that just doesn't always work.
Mhm.
Okay.
So now moving into the RUC helping model, from that is from Nakata. So developed by Nelson Jones in 2016, and it provides that framework for enhancing your advising relationships with relating, understanding, and changing. So it can be implemented using different advising strategies to connect with students. And it's very helpful for our Gen Z students because it has a lot to do with that interpersonal connection and authenticity of wanting to make that meaningful connection with someone and having someone on campus or like be able to reach out via email that they know will be authentic and actually truly want to help them. So it helps a lot with building that framework to connect with students and meet them at their own pace. So, don't mind going to the next slide. I can explain a little bit more in depth. So, for relating, establishing the common connections. So, those first impressions, whether it's in orientation or in your first advising meeting, or even via email of just sending in a like, welcome to Wayne State, and using that. But also, a lot with relating is using active listening. So, when you're either at orientation or in advising appointments with students, of like, we always tell them like make sure you're active listening to us to what we're saying, but we also have to put that for them too of what they're saying and trying to pick up on like some of those little things that they do mention to us. So relating with them and using that in a way to be able to connect with them. then using the understanding to deepen your understanding of the meeting, of why they're there, and really taking that time to understand why they're coming to you and what's the purpose of the meeting. That's always, I think, for probably most of the people here that meet with students, we all probably started advising sessions with like, awesome, how can I help you today? Like what are we here for? But I always try to continue to bring that up throughout the meeting. So like I use that as a first question so they can list it out and then continue to come back to that question to see if we've met the needs of that, of what they initially wanted to come in for, and if anything else new came into it, of like, I didn't think of that, but this is a whole new reason for me to come meet with you and talk to you about this that I just thought of. So it's giving them that autonomy to let them lead the appointment too, in a way where they feel that they can talk freely to us about what they need. And it builds that understanding connection too. And then changing, creating an action plan and following up with them. So it's super helpful for Gen Z students to see what a plan looks like because they're more likely to follow through on it. And then following up with encouragement and outreach. So with making like action plans, I'm a big person on making plan of works with students, even if it's only for like 2 semesters, as long as it's like something that they can get their hands on. And then in degree works using the plans, I always make a copy of like, here's your baseline, mine's locked. You cannot change it unless you meet with another advisor. But here's a copy for you that you can play around with, see what you think. Here's how to make your own one. If you don't even want to use that copy, you could make your own to get an idea. And then if you think you have an idea, you can reach out to me and I'm happy to help try and like take a look at it or do another appointment to look at it and readjust it with what other expectations are. Because obviously, like sometimes classes aren't offered in a semester, so on and so forth. So then you can help them build their plan that they see and make sense with, and then they're more likely to follow through with it. And then also with like the encouragement and outreach, that's a big piece of it of just trying to encourage them with like other emails and stuff. We all know sometimes Wayne State students get like bombed in their emails with a bunch of things and stuff like that. And also sometimes our departments are really big. Like I said, I'm over in bio. We have a lot of students, so there's only so much outreach we can do too. But that's what makes it helpful for doing some of those like small outreaches or other like at important times of how to do it because it does mean something to them at those times too.
Alrighty, so we will recap just a little. We talked about communication a lot in the RUC like helping model. So again, Gen Z values that authenticity, that pure influence is massive, and also relevance. So if you're able to relate with students, even with just like a common experience that you've had, maybe you were on probation when you were in college, this is a great way to just help destigmatize it. And then just looking at advisor communication styles, I feel like I definitely do. Use a lot of like maybe Gen Z language or like Gen Z communication in the way that I email with my students. But I just like to relate and kind of humanize my own self. So I like to do like an introduction email to my brand new students every single year, and I tell them a little bit about my interests that I really like to watch like reality TV on Netflix and I like to read. And they usually sometimes bring up those points that I make, and they're like, "Oh, I like that too. Tell me more." And that's just a great way of just like, setting yourself up as like, I'm a support system here for you in college, and you can definitely rely and relate back. Meeting them where they're at, I feel like that's something we talk about a lot, but also just adapting to their preferences. Some students really just they come prepared. They come with their phone out. And they're like, I have a bunch of or I have a bunch of questions I want to go through on my notes app. And if that's the way that you want to structure the meeting, let's go for it. And some students are just like, I'm not too sure why I'm here, but I would just like to check in and kind of see. And sometimes you have to set the tone a little bit more. That's just a good way to kind of get them to advocate for themselves and be like, okay, well, we're here because you obviously wanted to talk about something. We can take a few minutes to think about it. We can go through a couple of things. If it comes up, stop me, let me know. And I feel like that leads into advising techniques. So really or creating that rapport that is continuous. So I know sometimes that's very difficult to do, but following up with an email after an appointment, being like, hey, so this is what we covered today. These are the links that we were looking at, or creating those action plans and plan of works that Mary was talking about is just super, super useful in making sure that students feel like they can continually come back. We probably all see a lot of students, so we remember some, but we do not remember everybody. So sometimes it's very difficult to be like, okay, yes, so you were that person who did this and you're looking for that. But sometimes just creating that rapport and just making it seem like it is pretty continuous can be helpful. And then doing that advising as teaching. So really setting expectations. I feel like with my students, I want them to be as autonomous as they possibly can. So they have like a roadmap that I expect them to follow their first semester. And if they don't, we review it at the end of the semester and like, okay, so what did you do? What did you not do? Why did you choose to do it this way? Thank you so much for like giving me some more insight into it. But making sure that like I expect you as a student to look at courses, to do course planning on your own. And then if you have questions about it, you want to see kind of like, okay, maybe I don't want to take this class, like we can talk about it. And then aligning with the Gen Z values. So visual outreach is huge. I think flowcharts work really, really well and bullet points. And info maps, I think those are super helpful for students because it's pretty simple. There's some bulleted points on there and they can just follow it pretty easily. And then recommending some familiar tools. So using degree works a lot in appointments. That'll get them more used to actually going on it and like checking it for themselves, and making sure that they're on top of, checking off and making sure that they're taking the next class. But using stuff like Google Calendar, showing them how to use like the Canvas calendar, stuff like that. I know will take just a little extra, but it can be helpful to mention it to students. I know like as a student, I use Google Calendar so much. It was a little crazy. My my calendar is always like super color coded. But that, and I always mention it in appointments, they seem to really like it and they're able to kind of relate to it. And so that's a good way of just kind of aligning. And then I see that Becca has a question in the chat.
Yeah. So she said, any advice for helping them overcome slash get away from the comparison to peers, like taking too many credits and wanting to finish fast when it's not in their best interest? So one thing that I remember when we did the presentation, the first time that I talked a lot about personally in my communication style with students, especially being in the STEM base and having that a lot of like, I just want to finish fast, but you're taking biochemistry and physics together, and that's not a smart decision. I personally get really blunt with them. And I've noticed for Gen Z students that has been helpful in
Mhm.
being just like, let's look at this in a way of let's take into the context of you of like if I have any background of them of like you previously took these like three courses together and you didn't do well. Let's look in that in the context of you and your interest of courses and how we can see that like taking this many credits or this group of coursework isn't going to fit you. And I know that sounds like very I don't know, that's so hard to explain without like seeing an example. But just being, I don't know, I get very blunt with them in a way of just like that's not realistic. And then I'll also bring in like calculations of GPAs of like, especially if they're on like track to want to go to like some sort of like professional school of like med school or nursing, whatever it may be, of like, let's look at how this could affect your GPA and what that means for you. So I just try to like bring in like I don't try to do the whole like big scary thing, but that's kind of basically what it is too, of just being like if you do this and you don't do well, like this is going to be your outcome and that's your the consequence. And obviously sometimes students are going to be students. And again, it's their consequence. So I don't know, that would be my answer to the question. So that's like another piece of like communication aspect that sometimes it does get to a point that I think it can be helpful with Gen Z students to get a little bit more blunt and strict with how you communicate and concise.
Yeah, I will say it's pretty much the same thing. I get a lot of pre-nursing students who are consistently comparing themselves with their peers. And they're always like, well, they say they have a 4.0 and they're doing all of these and they're applying in a year and I want to apply in a year. Like, okay, but you're going to have to do 20 credits across two schools. That is extremely unrealistic.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I agree with Mary. It's you just have to be pretty blunt with them and just letting them know, like, in theory, maybe, but in practice, it's very unlikely. And again, it's kind of reminding them like you're not them and you are applying with your own experiences, you are you, and your specific pathway is going to look very different than everybody else's. And it's not, again, in your best interest to do compare and contrasting with other people. Um, I think what we were talking about in our staff meeting, I think this literally today was for a lot of students with bachelor's degrees, it takes like 6.5 years to get it done. And that's like just a common thing. Like they come in and they have the mindset if it's 4 years and then I'm done. And when that does not necessarily work out, they get very anxious. And I think it's just really like setting up those expectations around it. Like this is just your plan. Your plan is going to look a little bit different than everybody else's, and that's okay. It gives you sometimes more time and ability to make connections with professors, especially if you want to go into research, especially if you're in like a STEM focused major. That could just be a really good way of doing that. It's always about managing, and it's not always an easy conversation to have, I will say.
Another analogy, and I just remembered this because I used it like just a few days ago with a student where they were like, well, I know someone who did this. I used the analogy, and I remembered because it was something that Helen mentioned of like learning how to run your own race,
Mhm.
of you're gonna take different pathways to get there to get to the same spot. So I like compared it to like you're in traffic. Like I'm driving down Warren Avenue trying to get to the parking garage by the Welcome Center. And there's someone speeding ahead of me, but we end up at the same red light. Yes, they got there faster and I got there slower, but we ended up at the same point. And I use that analogy to kind of be like, yeah, they might get through the program a little faster, but come 5, 8 years from now, you guys will probably be in the same standpoint career-wise. And that's not a bad thing either, too. Like, it's okay to take your different times because maybe that works better for them, but not for you. And that's okay. So that's another analogy. And it seemed to like go pretty well with the student I was working with. So I don't know if that's a good analogy or not. Tell me if it's not.
I'm going to use that. I will definitely be using that. All right. Cool. Okay. And again, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat, but we have just a quick check-in question. So which of these strategies that we've talked about do you use or do you want to use within your own advising?
I'll unmute if that's cool. Um,
Yeah.
so I frequently, and I have without any fear of embarrassment, tell my students when they come in here and they get to that point of like, oh my God, I'm not going to graduate in 4 years. I was like, my love, it took me 7 to finish my undergrad and I failed nothing. But I was also battling with undiagnosed ADHD and like my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Like all of these things happen. My dad's fine, by the way. It was good. But like it's okay. I'm like, the push to do 4 years is for payment. Like most scholarships have a deadline and they just want you to get out with the least amount of debt humanly possible. And if that's not if that's not what's going to happen, it's okay. You can take a breath and just be, like be proud that you're doing this amazing thing because none of this is easy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like that's the other thing I use. I always tell students, like, I'm very transparent about like what my undergrad degree looked like, what journey looked like. I was like, I changed my major 5 times. Like, and then I have students who are like, I'm just so scared to withdraw from a class. I was like, you withdrew from one. I withdrew from like three. Like, it's okay. I promise. Like, and I don't know. I think using that and being more authentic with them, because I know we like mentioned that word a lot, but it gives one more of a human factor to yourself of like being like, I went through this too. I totally understand what you're talking about. And I think that helps them feel a little bit more at ease of being like, okay, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's like a breath. They're like, oh,
Mhm.
you didn't die. You're here in front of me functioning as an adult. I'm like, don't accuse me of being an adult, but real talk, I'm doing a thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that storytelling aspect is so, so powerful. I use it in orientation so much when we're talking about setting up a schedule because I did Calc 1, Gen Chem with the lab all in one semester. And I was like, just don't do that because I had no free time and I was consistently always studying and I almost failed both classes and it took so much work. And that always just helps kind of give them like, don't be me. Don't do what I did. Yeah, and I feel like Kim Helen, they all talk about that within the comments. They use storytelling, authenticity, just relating, using your own experiences. I kind of like what Michaela said. So if a student feels like they don't follow through, just putting a reminder in your calendar to email them to follow up. So having that like follow up aspect of it. Um, yeah, that's so helpful with some students because they're like, oh yeah, you're so right. And then they kind of see that you do care and that you are checking in on them. Um, Yeah, yeah. Dean Strauss pulls up a really great point. So some parents just like, yeah, they don't really understand Gen Z and they expect them to do specific career choices and major choices. And so having to also navigate that with some students who obviously do not want to go into like a STEM or a healthcare field, but they kind of feel that familiar like pressure to do so. That's a big thing. Cool. Okay. Anybody else want to share or comment? Good. I think we're good. I think we still have a little bit more time. We have some case studies. Do we want to go through all three or try to hit all three as much as possible?
Sure.
Okay,
Do you
we can
want to
try.
can go through like the first one and then go from there maybe?
Yeah, that works
Okay.
with me.
So our first case study is this is from a personal, so we kind of based the case studies on like some of our personal experiences at the time too. So the first one is one that I had gone through. So it says a freshman level student comes to meet with you to talk about degree paths. They have multiple AP scores, are on the pre-med path, and want to do a dual degree slash double major, and are persistent on graduating in 3 years. How do you go about helping this student? So, if anyone wants to put any ideas in the chat or unmute, I think we could do it like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are we doing number one right now? I
Yeah.
zoned out. Okay, I'll answer. That was a great example of Gen Z.
Yeah.
Also, my camera's not working for real, but but if this was my student, I would honestly start by mapping it out, right? They're very clear about what they want and they have an idea of what that looks like. So I would go ahead and map it out, and then that's when I would jump back and have the conversation about, okay, is this realistic?
So I actually get a lot of students that have all the credit coming in, and they want to get done in 2 or 3 years. But the way that I'm recently trying to explain it to them is they also need work experience. No one wants to hire a 20-year-old that pushed themselves through school early and then has no work experience, and you can't run a car, you can't run a hotel room, and you can't go out with your office for a happy hour. Um, but but really, so I do try to emphasize though the work experience first because that's you're already starting at a deficit being young. And so you need that experience to back it up, even if it takes you, instead of getting done when you could in 2 years, if it takes you three, but you've added that work experience, that just makes you stand out more then.
Yeah.
And I always use when the students do want to have the conversations about finishing fast, I always do fall back on the maturity that happens within college. And if you focus just solely on the academics, you're shortchanging that experience of being able to connect and communicate and learn more about yourself and have those experiences that are meaningful and will help you, especially if, you're planning to go into medical school. Same thing that Heather was talking about from the business end. I'm sorry, but as a patient, I don't want my doctor to look fresh out of undergrad, and look too young either. So it can be a benefit to get more experiences and to go through the degree a little bit longer. And then you're in a better position when you get to that next step.
Yeah. That's such an important aspect, like truly breaking down that a degree is not just your courses, it's not just your credits, it's not just like doing 121 credits and like graduating. It truly is your like experiences and like the people that you meet and your networking and your ability to like mature and to grow more as a person, to build on like those like leadership skills. Um, I think a lot of people are saying that in the chat. I definitely agree with everything that they're saying.
And there's a lot of talk about like look at your time budget and stuff. And that's
Mhm.
another thing I've been doing a lot more of, um, where it's like there are only so many hours in one week. And this is like how many hours you're supposed to like spend studying. And then this leaves you with this many hours to sleep. Like for a healthy sleep schedule, we all know college students are a little 50-50 on that sometimes. But then also it's like then you only have this much time to do whatever you want. Like, and you have to give yourself time to, yep, yes, the hour breakdown with it. So I don't know, it's super helpful in that way of like, yeah, you just really have to break it down and tell them those different parts of it. I like Casey, or what you said. These are the best years of your life, and you have the rest of your life to work. Yeah. Yeah.
Those are amazing. They really are though. Like you have to
Yeah.
engage with it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. I think we can move on to the second one. So this is a sophomore level student who comes to you feeling very disconnected from their major. They're not too sure what they want to do with it or how they want to go about it. When you ask them like kind of like, what do you want to do for a career? They just respond with, I just want to have a job so I have money. How would you go about helping this student?
This is where I try to lean into extracurriculars, so asking if there's anything that they do enjoy, so whether that's work, student orgs, just things that they're passionate about. Sometimes students will give you this narrative, right? Like, I just want any job so I have money, but then previously they've talked about something that they are passionate about, so maybe let's go back and talk about, you said you enjoyed being a basketball coach, and how could we turn that into a job, or what jobs might use those skills? So kind of coaching based on what you know and then what they know as well.
Yeah, Susie.
Career services.
Yeah, career services. That's great.
I love going like in appointments with students, like showing them the career services websites too, with like all of the different tools that they have online. Like
Mhm.
and the what's it called? Stepping blocks. Is that it? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
stepping blocks.
It's so helpful and it is like pretty fun. Like they do really enjoy like going in and looking at it and then yeah, focus too. Um so yeah, the career assessments, it's super helpful.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. We can move on to the third one. We have a little bit more time. So this is a senior level student who is highly career focused. They have planned out their last 2 semesters and they will have completed all of their requirements, but they don't really know what else to do to help them get the job that they really want. So how would you go about helping this student?
If they have specific jobs that they know they want to apply for, I'd maybe have them pull some job descriptions and see, aside from academics, what other skills those jobs might be looking for and kind of go down the checklist and say, do you have those skills? And then if not, what are some things that you could do to get those skills between now and graduation?
Yeah, that's amazing. I
Mhm.
like that. Yeah, Dean Strauss says informational interviews. Those are really, really helpful in just figuring out like, okay, maybe I want to do this, but maybe I'm not too sure what it entails. So finding people that could work out, handshake, career fairs, great job shadowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all great. Okay.
Yay.
We all did it. We're gonna go through, we'll break it down. These are kind of the stuff that we came up with, which is pretty much everything that everybody said. I'll let Mary start with one.
So, one is having those realistic conversations with the student about career path and destination. Also about that time management and time budgeting too within the semester. Building a potential plan of work for the student to see what the degree paths would look like and what those semesters would look like too. And then directing them to any other offices or colleagues that could assist them, whether it's a different major that you don't advise in and they want to ask more questions about, or also going to career services to see what's going to be best for them. And then for case study two, we talked about wanting to validate their feelings and avoid that judgment. And then, yeah, asking those open-ended questions and using the different tools through career services. If you want to take the rest, Christina. I don't think we can hear you again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I need a new computer. Okay. So going through creating those potential like alternative majors, this is something I do a lot with my students, so, like creating a backup plan or just looking at different ideas, something that might align with what they are interested in. A lot of those short-term goal setting, I feel like that's super helpful. So like setting a goal for the semester, like go look at XYZ and go see if you really enjoy it. And then for case study three, we looked at acknowledging their effort and getting through and getting to the point of senior year and getting ready to graduate, but also normalizing like it's super okay with being uncertain and how you want to graduate, how you want to go about it. I know when I was getting up to graduation, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I don't know who I want to be after this. Post grad is scary. Looking at or asking some of those more targeted questions to kind of really figure out what those options are, kind of what Becca was saying, and then just using some of those career tools or refer them to career services to have more of an in-depth conversation. And then just reframing and helping them build their goals regarding kind of what they're most interested in, if they want to do something in higher education or they want to do something with teaching or some kind of level of that, and where to look for that as well. I know we'll kind of refer them to LinkedIn, we'll refer them to Handshake, but sometimes, like, I know when I was in college, I did not know how to use those things. Everybody would always say, go to Handshake, go on LinkedIn. Like, okay, but like, how do I use it? How do I interact with it? So even having like some own personal experiences of how you use LinkedIn or Handshake to get informational interviews, to talk to other people, to look at different jobs that are available, that can help them a lot and just giving them some tips and tricks on it. Cool. Okay, we did it. We got through all of our case studies. It's the first time. Um, cool. So we have a couple of minutes to debrief. We have a very broad question, but is there anything else that you all would like to know about Gen Z students, advising Gen Z students as Gen Z advisors, or anything that we've talked about?
What does Gen Z think about the older generations and how we do things?
Honest
Like
opinions?
millennials, Gen Xers.
I think that depends on the Gen Z students you're asking. Because, like, for me, I think that, like, a lot of the things that people, like, previously did, like, it worked, you know? Like, I did a lot of the same things and stuff. Whereas I think if you talk to, like, the younger Gen Z now, they would probably, like, like, even, like, me hit me with, like, a, oh, hey, boomer, like, type of, and it's like, whoa. Like it worked. I don't know. Christina, I don't know.
I mean,
Like, just,
yeah, it does depend on who, like what Gen Z individual you're talking to.
well, I
Um,
mean, like, just in terms of like how we give advice. I know you were talking
mhm,
about being more blunt. Like, what kind,
yeah,
like, they do want to hear about our experiences and how we did things, and they
yeah.
take that and frame that differently. I always just thought that they didn't care and they didn't want to
Oh, absolutely
listen
not.
to me
They
and my
love it.
experiences.
No, I think people really like hearing to, especially from older generations of like,
Mhm.
okay, it really hasn't changed that much too. It's super helpful to be like, okay, it's actually still just such a normal experience to go through this. So it's helpful to hear that. And like, again, as we mentioned, the Gen Z stare and
Yes.
like disassociations, as our memes were showing through the presentation, like that can happen, but they do in my opinion, I think like they all really do appreciate having that perspective too.
Mhm. I will say, even for me, when I was a freshman through senior year with I had like two or three advisors. I loved kind of hearing what their path was in college because I was like, okay, so it's perfectly fine not knowing exactly what I want to do and not knowing how to go about it. So that's great. I don't think like the generation difference really does impact that much. They will take any advice that is given to them that is presented in an authentic manner very, very well. So yeah. Ooh, thank you for sharing that, Ashley. I'm gonna download that and use it.
Yeah, me too.
That's so cool. Alrighty. Anything else that anybody wants to share or know more about? Take that as a no. Um, cool. So this is just our like really quick, like this is everything that we covered. So we looked at some of that background, we looked at the RUC helping models and practical strategies, and then we did some case studies and open dialogue. That is everything that we have had. Um, thank you all for being here and for participating. I really enjoyed this. I thought this was pretty fun.
It was great, and you're getting so many accolades in the comments or in the chat. So I hope that you both are seeing all of these thank yous and excellent presentations roll in. I will plug the ATA and just say we are trying to do workshop evaluations this term so that we can plan programming. I say we, I can do programming that's really meeting the advising community needs. So there is a survey in the chat. If you wouldn't mind taking it, I would appreciate it. And thank you so much for joining us. I think this was excellent. Like, just I'm blown away. And good luck to both of you presenting at NACADA.
Thank you.
There you go.
Have a good day.